The LWRC M6 was developed in the early 2000s to compete along with the standard military M4s and the short-stroke piston contemporary, the 416, and later the SIG 516. Direct impingement, or internal piston guns depending on how tismy you want to be about it, were thought to be outdated and people were looking for the next jump in small arms tech. Boy, were they wrong. Full disclosure on the LWRC M6A1G that I have here is that I have no relationship with LWRC. I tend to dislike the company, but like their products. Make of that what you will. This rifle was sent in for me to review by a kind viewer of the channel, and I was able to use it for several months and put about 1,000 rounds of ammo on it. The LWRC M6A1G utilizes a modern FSB and a 3-piece quad rail. The A2 versions and onward ditch the front sight block for a more modern look, longer handguards, and all-around better accessory mounting capabilities. Now let's go ahead and start with the barrel. This is the 14.5-inch model with a pin-and-weld reared-in dual-port brake. The chambering is of course 5.56 with a 1-in-7 twist. Material is, I believe, 4150 chrome vanadium steel, and it is finished in their proprietary Nicor coating, which is like a better nitride apparently. And of note, at this point in time, it has held up very well to, well, years of abuse. Profile is very heavy in the back, and a .750 from the FSB, basically straight out to the 1/2x28 threads. Now the FSB on the M6A1G is standard looking, but of course instead of housing a carbine length gas tube, we have the old LWRC piston system installed. Now this is a short stroke piston system. That means we have a separate op rod that smacks into the bolt carrier to get the system to cycle. Piston systems were for a long time looked at as more reliable than a DI gun, but that's just not the case a lot of the time, and there's so much minutia of your specific setup, environment, and use case that will dictate how that ends up in reality. The quick and cleaner on a piston system is that you get less gas coming back into the receiver because there is no gas tube funneling those hot gases through your BCG. You still have gas coming back down the bore, of course, so it doesn't eliminate all of the gas coming back into the system, just reduces it. The downsides, of course, of a piston system are carrier tilt, extra weight, more recoil, the bolt unlocks faster, increased parts wear, barrel harmonics, and in some cases, optic degradation. Now, most of those issues can be mitigated to some extent, but they are worth mentioning. Important to note on the LWRC M6A1G is that the piston system doesn't have any adjustments, so what you see is what you get. Fortunately, the way it's designed, the LWRC M6A1G, I'm not calling it that anymore, it bleeds off extra gases very efficiently. I have shot this suppressed and unsuppressed, about 60% suppressed and 40% unsuppressed, and when using an H2 or an H3 buffer, you can swap between the two very comfortably. When unsuppressed, it would eject ammo at around 330 or so, and when suppressed with my cans anyways, it would eject about 230, which for a rifle with no adjustability is pretty darn good. However they designed the piston to run, it does a good job of bleeding off or dumping the extra gases added by a suppressor. Moving on to the handguard, we have our classy carbine length quad rail evoking those GWAT vibes. The handguard is technically 3 pieces. The top and bottom bolt together via 4 bolts, 2 on each side that lock onto the barrel nut. The top section has an additional removable piece, however, so you can perform maintenance on the piston system if needed. Now that removable section is held in place by 2 tensioners on the front of the handguard that have a rubber stopper for some reason. The problem is, if you torque them all the way down by hand and don't remove the rubber stoppers, that top section does have some wobble. Not much, but there is some wobble in that removable section, and that's where you're going to mount maybe your laser aiming module. I think it might be okay with a laser unit because again the wobble is minimal, but when I was using it at night, I simply moved the lamb to the side rails as those are very solid. Combo that with a vert grip and you're back in the Modern Warfare 2 days. Later, the M6A2 will remove the front sight block in exchange for a better, longer handguard, which makes all of the accessory mounting much easier. Moving back to the upper, we have what looks like a arrow roll mark on the forged, standard-ish mil-spec upper receiver, which I think is perfectly fine for this sort of system. Inside, we have a one-piece carrier, which means that the strike face is all machined into the carrier. That is basically a must for a short-stroke piston system, as you do have a metal op rod, a steel op rod, smacking the carrier every time you pull the trigger. As far as materials and coatings go on the BCG, I'm actually not sure. It's hard to find specific information on that, and some sources are conflicting. What I can tell you is that it has held up very well. The finish still looks good, easy to clean. There is of course wear in the normal expected places, and the bolt seems to be holding up just fine. On top of the receiver, we have our LWRC rear sight, which is actually really good. For an iron sight setup, it's great. I don't have any issues with that at all. Now let's talk about how it was to use. Other than the shorter handguard, it was actually pretty good. The piston system isn't as refined as more modern options. It's still not as nice as a SIG 516, Caracal 816, or even the PWS, but those are of course long stroke pistons, so not quite a fair comparison. Even so, it's still decent to use. It is a little jumpy under high rates of fire, but it's something you can make work. Now, talking about accuracy, well, you stick a heavy barrel from a good manufacturer into an AR-esque platform, and you get pretty good results. On top of just punching paper, I took it out to 500 plus yards using the TA-11 ACOG with the BDC, and it worked great. Now, in 2024, is this a good option for you? No, not if you're looking at getting one. If you already have one and it's your main rifle for some reason, great. It's not an ideal setup by any means, but I think you can definitely make it work. The performance is there. What you're lacking is some usability. Of course, your parts are going to be harder and harder to find if you ever have an issue with the piston system. And again, it's not a terrible rifle. In fact, I would say it is quite good, just maybe eclipsed by more modern options. Now, when we move on to value, you can still find some LE trade-ins for these guys that are in very used condition for a little bit over $1,000, and unless you're a collector, there are so many better options for the same price right now with better features. Even some modern LWRCs can be found for a similar price if you know where to look. And even though this rifle is a little older and about a half pound heavier than some contemporary options, I would still absolutely take it over like a Superlative Arms or Adams Arms piston system. Rest in peace to the latter. But again, I just think that there are so many better options for the modern discerning buyer, especially in that $1,000 to $1,500 price range. So at the end of it all, I think the letter and number soup fits into the same vein as a lot of other piston rifles that rose up and fell away just as quick. The M4 outlives another one. Now, if you made it this far into the video, go ahead and do the things the algorithm likes to help me break out of YouTube purgatory. And of course, you can check out links in the description or the pinned comment to support the channel. But with all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. God bless.